Hi, welcome everybody to another Fireside Friday. My name is Jack Miller. I'm the president of T360, and I'm here with a couple of guests from the organized real estate world and that have had a lot of different contributions into the space over the past few years. We're going to have a great conversation with them. Co-hosting with me today is Clint Skutchan, our VP of Organized Real Estate Consulting. So he's going to be also helping me lead the conversation with our guests. I would like to introduce, first off, Tim Dain. Tim Dain is currently the Chief Executive Officer of Maris. So welcome, Tim. It's really great to have you, and delighted to have you on for today. And separately, we have Jon Colie. Jon has had a lot of different roles in the industry, is currently the VP of MLS and Industry Relations for Home Services of America, and has also been heavily involved with Bright MLS, serving in a variety of roles on their board. So welcome, Jon. We're delighted to have both of you here and look forward to what will likely be an energetic conversation about the MLS and organized real estate. So I'll get us kicked off. First of all, Tim, how have you been? How's your quarantine been? How's this whole period of time where it's been an industry novel time. A lot of things are different than they were last year, but also personally very different. How's your health? How's your family? How are you doing? Give us a little update.
Health's great. Family health is great. We've managed to avoid the pandemic, so that's always good news. I think we talk about this enough in enough conferences that everybody's kind of fully aware of the situation that's happening. I'd say the only novel thing from a work perspective that we did, maybe a little different, that might be worth mentioning, is we actually studied the airflow in our office. And we've reopened, but we've reopened in a way that no two people share the same airflow at any given time. So that's our pandemic, guideline, I guess, if you will, for returning to work.
Got it. Well, Jon, same question for you. How are you doing? How's your health? How's your family? Tell us a little bit about how you've been coping with the 2020, the year that 2020 has given us.
Health-wise, no problem. No COVID in my family yet, and we're doing everything we can to keep it that way. I would say I miss all the conferences in person, and your conference T3, really missed that one. I miss being with all of my industry friends, and Zoom, getting a little Zoom saturated, especially we're in fall conference season, as we all know, and so I've been Zooming a lot. The only other impact since March, of course, with travel cut down, I did have to travel for home services business down to see our regional company in Mobile, Alabama. And so I couldn't fly on the airlines. I didn't want to fly on the airlines. So I have a 50-year-old Cessna 182, and I'm instrument rated, and I flew a lot of instrument flying in my youth, but I had stopped about 10 years ago. So I took a few lessons, brushed off my instrument ticket, and took another check ride, and then I flew down IFR to Mobile for a week and back. So that's, but then I parked the airplane. I haven't done that again. So although I would do it again tomorrow if I have a need to travel. But right now, I'm missing the travel, missing my industry friends, missing being in real life with all of you guys.
Definitely miss being together at conferences and spending time. And I think you're our first pilot on this entire series. We had somebody that flew themselves somewhere, so that's pretty novel, and does sound like it might be a very fun thing to do.
A quick technology tie-in is that everything's on iPad mini now, and you can get NextRad weather radar for the entire United States updated every 2 minutes while you're in the air flying. So it's so much easier than when I flew IFR 10 years ago to have situational awareness on weather and what's going on. So anyway, the technology is helping us out in all kinds of ways that we don't even know yet.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'd want a little bit more than an iPad before I started flying a plane, but that's just me personally. Jon, I'm going to ask you, I'll start with you on this question, then we'll come to you to Tim. We've mostly got folks that are in paid executive level positions within organized real estate joining us on the Fireside Fridays this month, but you're one of the volunteer leaders. And so talk a little bit about how you moved into volunteering within organized real estate. Like what got you hooked? Generally it's one of those things where someone kind of got voluntold, but what's your story in terms of coming into the MLS and association space?
Well, so I was CEO of a regional company in Maryland, and we were part of Home Services since 1999, so Champion Realty. And one of the things that I've always believed, and one of the things that Home Services believe, Ron Peltier kind of led the way on this, pushing us all to give back to the industry and to not just run our real estate companies to make money, but also to participate in organized real estate. And Bob Moline was a great example of a leader in that, and Gino Blafari as well. So they really encouraged us very strongly about a decade ago to get involved in the volunteer leadership of MLSs so that that decisions were made that we were part of and that we could help steer things in a good direction. So I volunteered and got on the board of MRIS, and then we had the opportunity to combine MRIS, Trend, and 7 other local associations to build Bright. And that was a fascinating process. Stefan came out for the very first meeting. We invited everybody from 38 different MLSs to come to a meeting in Baltimore and talk about the future. And then from that, it distilled down into a group of 9. And we spent a year and a half working on that. And it was sort of like an overnight in a hotel every 2 months to work on that. And it was a great process. Stood it up almost 4 years ago, and I've been chairman since it started. One of the things that we thought was good to not have a leadership ladder like in an association, but to treat an MLS like a business. And so sometimes you need a continuity of leadership. So we've actually had the same officers, almost the same. We've had a couple changes for 4 years. So anyway, that's how I got involved, and had some great mentors in that, David Sharon, Brian Donnellan, so a lot of great people. And then that opened the door for NAR to get to know me and then put me on various things. And I'll be the chair of the MLS committee next year. So thanks to Charlie Oppler.
Once it gets in your blood, it really does become a part of what you know and what you do. How have you grown in terms of what you're able to do brokerage-wise from what you've been able to learn from your volunteer capacity within the MLS space? Because usually it's kind of the flip side that people are bringing the brokerage back into the MLS. But I'm curious what you take back into the brokerage space, especially in your role now.
Well, so, Champion Realty, we were in, we had 7 offices in 4 counties. And then when Home Services bought Long and Foster, and with 230 offices in 7 states, it just made sense. I was the donut hole and they were the humongous donut. So it made sense to merge those 2 together. So I had a role with Long and Foster for a bit, but with retirements at Home Services, some Bob Moline, Alon Shaver, and others, they're created a gap, and they needed somebody who knew MLS people. And the beauty of being part of both MRIS and then Bright was I knew everybody like Tim and everybody in the Cove group and a lot of people at CMLS. And so it was a natural fit for me to personally take over that role for Home Services.
Interesting. Tim, what's your origin story? How did you find your way into this crazy world of organized real estate?
Well, let's see. I was born in no, I won't start there. It's sort of an interesting, both personal and professional journey, I guess. I was traveling North and South America doing casino database conversions before I entered real estate. And great job, made good money, and was really happy. Newly married couple, I guess maybe a few years into it. But the personal side of it is my father-in-law contracted terminal cancer. So we had to sell our house. We didn't have to, but we chose to sell our house to move in with my wife's family to sort of help through that transition, that end-of-life transition, right? And I think during that time, it became obvious that I wasn't going to be able to travel nearly as much as I was. And I think we fired more than, well, I'll just say more than one realtor in the process of selling our house. And I thought, probably wrongly at the time, but at the time I remember thinking, man, if these people can sell homes, anybody can sell a home. So I took my tech background of what they called brain dumps testing, and I just started testing, taking the real estate tests that were online over and over and over again. Then I signed up for an online course, left that open so that the number of hours would tick by, and went and watched TV or played golf or whatever while those hours were ticking by. Once the hours were over, I had taken enough practice tests that I just went in and passed the real estate test. So that's probably a testimony on how easy it is to get a real estate license in some places, which I think it's become a little harder, but that's how I ended up in real estate. Sold for a few years with RE/MAX, ended up opening my own brokerage to start the first environmentally sustainable community in our area. And then that was 2007. We got a few display homes up. 2008 hit, and we all know what that did to overpriced green homes or just any home sales in general. So lost a lot in that journey, I guess, in terms of monetary and database contacts, things like that. I had served on the MLS board at the same time. And after that brokerage kind of went belly up, there was a job open at the MLS as the tech director. It was kind of a nice marriage of my technical background plus my newfound love for real estate. So I ended up being a technical director at a small regional MLS of 2 associations, and parlayed that into moving down to run the Austin, Texas MLS by getting great connections. I think that's the first time I ever met Jack Miller. He was at a brokerage, and I actually got on a plane to fly down there and see some of the technology his brokerage was building. But ended up in Austin and eventually made my way back to my hometown of St. Louis to run Maris.
It's very good. Yeah, Tim, I remember that meeting. That's been, a good, 12, 13 years now. So it's been great to see your journey since we met. So, because you've really done some moving around. So, so this month our focus is on organized real estate, and we're talking about kind of what does the industry learn from this year, and where are we as providing services to members. Helping people through what ended up looking like a really scary thing from a business perspective in March and April, to now, like, people are just busy like it's the middle of the summer. Some people are having their best years, ever. So I'm curious to hear, in the roles you're in, like what you guys have seen, and where you think we are today. What's happening in the marketplace today from your perspective, and then how's that impacting your members and member support, or John, even in your role, just what you're seeing as a board member. And we can start with either one of you. I guess I'll pick. John, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about this year and kind of the impact it's had, and what you've seen.
Yeah, I think, we were all at that top of the roller coaster when I went over the edge in the beginning of March. And one of the things that we did at Bright was, the first thing was, it was, all hands on deck. We need to understand what's going on. And so we went to weekly executive committee meetings. So there's 8 of us, and we were meeting every week just to make sure that we were moving fast and understanding what management was doing to manage Bright. But we looked at the data, and we realized that economists use data that's old. They're looking at the month has to close, and then they have to take a few weeks to process it and all of that. And it's just a tremendous lag. And so we immediately went to daily statistics, and we put out a report to all of our brokers and to everyone with what's going on today compared to this exact day last year. And we were comparing everything from how many showing appointments are we making, new listings, how many listings in inventory, sales, all of that. And of course, it all just absolutely plummeted. But we cover a large area, 7 states, and the District of Columbia. And so we looked at all the areas, and some of them were locked down. Everybody locked down hard day one, but they started unlocking at different rates, and we were able to see what was happening when they unlocked. And so that daily data gave us tremendous ammo to give both to our brokers to use for lobbying, but also lobbying on behalf of Bright. For example, Pennsylvania really didn't follow the initial CDC guidelines about critical businesses and things like that. And so they were not allowing showings at all. And you can totally see the difference between Maryland or Virginia or District of Columbia or Delaware, West Virginia, any of them versus Pennsylvania. So we were able to give some really great data to our brokers who then used that in lobbying at the State House in Pennsylvania to open up their restrictions and to understand that there are ways to safely show houses in COVID. So I would say that using the data and pivoting and realizing that we needed to go on in near real-time statistics compared to a known point a year ago, that was just so tremendously helpful for our brokers and our agents and everyone. And also our agents were using it directly with home sellers and buyers.
Yeah, because knowledge is really the currency. And, knowing, and we have such a dynamic market where things have changed so quickly, last month's stats or year-over-year statistics are really not very useful because they're not telling you what's happening, right now. So,
you're so right, Jack. And data without analysis is just noise. And so we actually hired a data scientist at Bright, and we're really trying to analyze the data and make it really meaningful for our subscribers. And it's really paid off. It really paid off because everybody had a V-shaped recovery except Pennsylvania had a U-shaped recovery. It tanked, went along flat, and then when they finally opened it up, boom, then they came up. And so there looks like a total, like that. But everybody else was V because they opened up pretty quick.
That's great. Tim, what about you? What did this period of time look like from your organization's perspective, and how did your members react to it, and what are you seeing now?
Yeah, I think I'm going to broaden it a little bit. I think John's example, and by the way, Bright's probably leading the industry in terms of the stats and how they're interpreting and putting them out. So great job over there. But I think that example and many more throughout the industry are things that we can point to say that this last year, I think, has sort of shaken the MLS out of a complacency mode, if you will, because a lot of times we do have these little pockets where there's just one MLS in that whole geography, right? So there's been a long period of time where you haven't had to be as responsive to members as you probably should have been as a service organization all along. So I would say that there's a bit of a hyper responsiveness to broker needs this year that I haven't felt in the past being in this industry. And I think that's a great thing. I can remember back to the CMLS when the Realty Alliance CEO stood on stage and gave the ominous 10 days, which we all know meant, a lot of different things at the time. But now that same person sits on my board of directors and talks to us about how brokerages will respond to certain changes or certain evolutions within the MLS. So I think that's been the primary takeaway here, Jack, at least for Maris, is that we're so much more customer focused now than we've ever been in the past. We've hired people from the brokerage community. We hired a person that spent, Jeff Bosch, who spent years running a brokerage. He has a wife that sells real estate still, and it gives a really great connection. And actually, John, today he's working on statistics for a brokerage that has asked for a certain set of custom statistics. So it's all about the hyper responsiveness and the awareness of broker needs and actually becoming, MLSs, I think, across the nation are becoming more service related. Whereas before we were maybe more vendor product tech support related, right? So I think it's a great evolution though that's come about because of this need to respond in a faster manner to what's being demanded.
Yeah, and I think the value, you said something there that I want to just expand on in terms of the value of the ability to help brokers with the data and understanding and interpreting the data more, because for a long time, I think the MLS is just a necessity. It's just, we all need a database. We all need to put things in and get things out. And it's just how we do business. But when you have a period like the one we just experienced, then then having those services like you're describing, where a broker can come and say, hey, I'm trying to learn something about the data or the interactions my agents are having with clients. there's a whole, like, that's rich. There's a lot to do there based on the data that MLSs have. So
Yeah, there's a ton to do there, and I wish we could borrow Bright's data scientists for a while. But like the specific request just working on today, it should be a no-brainer, right? The broker wants 20 zip codes that break down across 2 counties, and he wants to break down things like average days on market or average sale price. And we have great tools for that, but like the tool that we've built that we've partnered with a company to bring to market limits it to 4 zip codes. So you can certainly get 20, you just got to produce 5 different charts to get there. So there's these shortcomings and things, and we're trying to figure out how do we best respond to that. And now let's build one or partner with somebody to expand on it that can offer an unlimited number, because every brokerage needs going to be just a little bit different in terms of statistics, metrics, marketplaces, all those things.
Tim, I think one of the things that's become clear is this idea of, conglomerated data sets. And we've seen the importance of national data over the last 6 to 9 months, or hyper-regional data. And so with that, and it goes really back to this conversation we're having here about the importance of data and then utilizing it for knowledge and market understanding, and in this case, socioeconomic changes that we're seeing in our country. What's your take on, and what are you guys doing as an organization to not only consolidate organizations, which gets a lot of attention, but to consolidate data, which I think you and I have talked about is equally, if not more important than the organizational aspects in many ways?
Yeah, I think one, leaning on every tool or opportunity you have that might have a commonality with a neighbor, right? So something simple like RPR comes to mind. Certainly, if that's the only thing you can do, go ahead and share your listings with RPR View and share active and share closed with the marketplaces next to you, because the borders that we've created should not be barriers to accessing data that's important to a brokerage's business, right? At least that's my view. But we take it, a step further, and we've taken lessons from Bright over the years and certainly other MLSs that have had consolidations, and we've sort of joined forces with Minnesota and Iowa to bring to market something called the Common Data Platform, which is really just an MLS database, yet we all keep our own brand, keep our own services, keep our own support structure, our own rules, yet a practicing agent in St. Louis can access data from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois. It's all in one common database with multiple front ends and multiple tool sets running off of it, different rule sets for different marketplaces. So I think it's important to start to tear down the borders. You can have your barriers to service back up, but brokers should be picking your MLS because of the service you provide them, not because you've data trapped them, if that makes sense. And we see a lot of that as we try to expand.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And it's not just data trapping. Sometimes it's data exclusion, with the idea that then no one will come to our market, right? There's this protectionist aspect that we see happening a lot. And so I know you've employed some of those strategies. And like you said, you've looked towards Bright. Jon, you guys kind of amassed this organization that covers as large a geographic area in as many states as anyone. And you did that through specific consolidation efforts. But now, as you kind of get settled in there, what are you all doing in terms of expansion, and like I say, organizationally or data wise? I think I just saw a new data share agreement that you guys signed at Bright within the last week or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlottesville is our first data share. We've only brought people in as shareholders and made them part of the core business. But we've got a chief growth officer now as of this summer. And so Troy Reck is trying to help us with that. But let me pivot and tell you something that from my home services hat, something that hasn't made sense to me for a long time, and that is I have a license for a state. All real estate licenses are statewide license, and I'm a realtor, so therefore every other realtor in the state has in the code of ethics they've agreed to cooperate with me. But they haven't agreed to compensate me. So the offer of cooperation and compensation is actually the most beautiful thing in the world that we have in the US. It makes us different from everywhere else, where we have competitors who are agreeing in advance to cooperate and share in the commission. If you bring a buyer to my listing, I will compensate you. But that agreement splits apart in that the cooperation is part of NAR, or, you know, for your realtor hat, and then the compensation is part of your MLS subscription agreement, or it could be part of a data share agreement. But that ability where you can't sell a listing in your state that legally you have a license to. I'm going to leave aside the do you have adequate knowledge of that market and whatever. That's just a shield people hide behind. But let's say you do, but you're not a member of that MLS, then they don't have to pay you. That to me, that doesn't make any sense. So it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. A lot of people question that. So there is a movement that is trying to work to within NAR structure to try and change so that the offer of cooperation and compensation are tied at the state license level and at your state realtor membership level, so that if you have a license and you can sell anywhere in Missouri, you don't have to necessarily belong to every one of those MLSs. I will tell you the consumer has no borders. They go online and they can see every house, frankly, in America. But if you have a license and you could sell anywhere in Missouri, you should be allowed to sell everywhere in Missouri. And so that's something that look for that, especially next year. There's people who are going to be trying to move that forward, and it just makes sense.
So we touched on kind of the organizational and the data piece, but one thing I think that's really emerging in the MLS space in terms of expansion strategies is now service provision. So we've seen where CRMLS, California Regional MLS, is now reaching clear across the country to Louisiana to say we can offer services. Tim, you noted your work that you're doing in terms of a back-end database that's more of a service-oriented approach to bring the data together. Tim, maybe I'll go to you on this one. Can you talk a little bit about the idea of expansion in terms of beyond just the data to now being service providers, as you said? Are you focused on delivering services to those that you serve? And that could be now non-geographic, it seems like more and more. That's a thought process in terms of growth.
Yeah, I think the difference between now and even just, you know, a couple of years ago is that there is a massive amount of experimentation in the MLS consolidation, partnership, growth, service levels. There's just a lot of, and it's good. I say this in a good way. There's a lot of spaghetti hitting the wall right now, right? There's what Bright MLS continues to push the boundaries on. There's what Art's done. There's Matt down at Armels and Chris Carrillo and what they're doing with stuff. And there's what we're doing here in the Midwest with the Common Data Platform. And I'm sure there's 10 other examples out there, right? So I think it's an exciting time. I'm not sure what will stick though, Clint. I think that servicing makes a lot of sense. I think Art came on the T3 stage when we were out in California, 2 years ago, and talked about the restaurant modeling under, I forget the brand, but they own like KFC, Taco Bell.
That's Yum Brands.
Yum Brands, yeah. And I think that kind of MLS model is emerging, right? You can, if you squint hard enough, you can see that out on the East Coast with Bright. You can see it in CDP a little bit, and you can certainly see it in what Art Carter's trying to doing, where you have a parent company that can consolidate a lot of things, whether it's database, service centers, accounting, and then having individual brands below that, right? I think it's smart. I think that's the way we're headed. I hope where we end up is that we have 5 or 10 national data nodes, if you will, across the United States that are all interconnected and can serve as failovers for each other. But eventually we get into this networked MLS platform where a broker's buying data access and then picking where they want to be serviced. Right? To me, that's the best end model for all of this.
Well, that's a nice segue to kind of my follow-up for this conversation, which is about this, multi-state, as MLSs move across state lines and provide services across state lines. You just described some scenarios. I don't know, John, do you have any thoughts about that? Because Bright is a multi-state, organization, and so I'm just curious as how that differs from, if you've got people all in one state, like you said, you can get the cooperation and compensation within the context of a state. what does it look like when you have an organization that's serving multiple states or expanding across states? And what have you learned about that in your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's as we all know, there's 3 or 4 main vendors who provide MLS systems to everybody, and then you have large companies like CRMLS, like Bright, who take these components and plug it all together and then give it out to their customers. But now they're also this retail wholesale model where they're taking that MLS in a box and putting that out to smaller MLSs who don't have the scale to have the great pricing from the vendors that we're all using and things like that. This is where it gets a little touchy. We all know that a lot of associations use the MLS as a cash generator to fund all the other good works that the association does. And I proudly wear my RPAC Golden R, and I'm a full-on believer in the National Association of Realtors and the states and the locals. But I think it becomes a problem when you have, okay, the wholesale cost is X, and now we're going to add on a markup, and it's got to be reasonable markup. And so I think that's a challenge for our industry, because the smaller associations or any association needs to start figuring out how they provide their services without putting too much of a markup on there. So I'd say that's one of the challenges with that wholesale retail model. But there are actually, in that wholesale retail model, there are tasks that the local association does. So they are entitled to some money, because they do have to spend some money and have staff and do training and do whatever their share of the work is. But I think that's the one that has to be sorted out.
Yeah, that understanding what the bounds of the relationship are in terms of what's coming from the MLS provider, and then what's coming through the local association, who's actually hiring and managing staff and making sure that things work and onboarding people and providing a support desk and all of that. So yeah, I can see that that's still an area where I think we're, as an industry, figuring out who does what and how much of the money do you keep for that. So it's going to be ongoing. We had a member on the call ask a question that I thought I would just throw in because it's timely, relevant to the conversation. Was talking about developing services versus buying off-the-shelf, or developing software versus off-the-shelf software. Now, Tim, I know you just talked about you've got some people that you've hired to do some work for you. So, and I know Bright has also done the similar kinds of thing. But how do you? And then Tim, you and I have some history with some projects of evaluating vendors together.
Oh,
so
yeah.
What's the, like, talk to me about the thought process of an MLS as far as build versus buy, and for what you're seeing right now.
Well, I think there's 3 choices really, right? There's build, buy, or partner.
Partner, yeah.
So, and we don't do enough buying in this industry. We do tons of partnering. We rarely buy technology that we can own and maintain, and we do some development, right? Some building. So I tend to focus on the core aspects of MLS when I'm thinking about building. If we're going to build, then, and my perspective has certainly shifted over the years, but I think now if we're going to build, it has to fall into the data in, data storage, data out. Those are the 3 pieces or 3 components. And maybe you're just doing one, but those are the 3 components that I think it's important for the MLS to have more ownership, more control over, and be able to be more responsive to those that they serve, if you can own those 3 things. So that's where we focus our time now. We have one full-time developer that works on a team of, I think it's up to 10 or 12 developers now, with the other MLS in the common data platform. So we're developing exactly that they gave us a head start, certainly. So we partnered with John Mosey up at North Star MLS, and we have data in, data storage, and we haven't built data out, but we're both part of MLS Grid, which is an MLS owned data out, if you will. So I think those are the 3 areas to focus on. You can always build a shiny product or a shiny penny, but really what matters is those 3 components.
The core of MLS services is that. And what about for service provision? Or John, did you want to jump in on that?
I just wanted to say, Tim sells himself short. You know, we worked together on the MLS Technology and Emerging Issues Advisory Board, and he's really a bright bulb, and he's done a lot of stuff. He's not just, some of these are bigger projects that he's part of, but he's done a lot of stuff on his own down there, and I don't know that he gets all the credit that he deserves in the industry.
I appreciate that.
Well, I guess same question for you, John. What do you see in terms of build, buyer, partner from the perspective you had working with Bright? Is that are those conversations at the board level, and you guys talk about that, or and what's the approach that you see people take?
I'll tell you. I think sometimes I almost need to wash my mouth out with soap after I say this, but I think that we work too hard to get our vendors to cut their costs so that we can, spend less money with them, which then gives them less resources to then improve their products. And so then that creates a vicious circle where then now we're hiring people to build our own stuff because we don't think that we like what we can get from a vendor. And so that whole vendor world is all in flux right now. And I think so, it's going to change, and technology is changing. And, I heard Jeff Bezos talking about machine learning or artificial intelligence or something. And he said, I have 10 to 12,000 engineers working on that. And I thought the 2,000 engineers that he's not even certain about is more than the engineers we probably have in the entire organized real estate. And that's a rounding error for him. So for us to think that we can keep up with an Amazon when they just have resources like that. So we have to work smarter. And I do think, though, that that this build, it's all becoming a big, mosh pit of technology, and we all should participate and share and work together, because frankly, we're inside organized real estate, and we need to do what we can for our ecosystem because otherwise it's going to be done outside.
Sometimes, for those that are watching that are, just out there selling, or maybe they are some of our technology partners, they hear these conversations related to MLS and association, and it seems so insulary. And even the conversations we've had today, I mean, outside of them obviously being able to do business, why does this space of association and MLS in particular really matter to these folks? So these conversations we're having here today, what does it really mean for the real estate industry long term? And John, I might start with you on that one.
I'll tell you, if you want to ask a practitioner how important is the MLS, just turn it off for a few hours. Oh, man. And we all do that every now and then. Hopefully it's only for a few minutes, but I mean, we get updates. We were down for 17 minutes and people are like wigging out. So I don't really have any more than to say that this is really so fundamental to what we do for a livelihood. And it's not just us. The other thing is you turn off the internet or turn off a feed to a major portal and you hear from your sellers in seconds. So.
Yeah, I think they get that piece of it, but I think they get frustrated by the all this internal conversation. Like, so specifically, John, you mentioned this, over reliance for monetary value back to the association, but there's also just the value proposition itself. You're right. Everybody understands the value of the MLS. In our own survey work that we do, we ask about value to business, and literally it gets best in class rating all the time, where everything else is maybe in the superior to good range. And, we have like 98% to say it's either very valuable or valuable. So, I mean, that's an inherent known, but then the association at times has a hard time, understanding their value proposition beyond that. So all these conversations are almost association-like, and yet to your point, John, you have an entity that's structured to be more business-like. So as all these changes, the expansion, all these things are being talked about, why should the broker community pay attention and participate? And obviously you kind of got that in your companies that you've worked for, have gotten that from the beginnings, but it can be frustrating to sit around these tables. So why stick it out if you're not in that culture now?
So there's business and politics, and politics is the art of It's somewhat similar to sales. It's persuasion and getting people to go in the right direction, whatever. The National Association of Realtors and the whole realtor family, they do an awesome job at really protecting home ownership and protecting the playing field so that we can all operate together. You should never underestimate the value of arbitration that we have as realtors, where you get to hear your case from practitioners who understand really what's what, as opposed to a judge who doesn't understand. And that is so inexpensive and so fair and so quick. And that is just a tremendous benefit of the Realtor Association. The lobbying also goes without saying. I mean, the things that the Realtor family did for all of us in the spring, lobbying, was just phenomenal. But then on the other hand, then you have a technology company, and it's two different disciplines, and it really is a business and should be run like a business, and it's a different mindset. So I think it's important for brokers to play in both areas. I think that they need to be engaged in politics, local and national, to protect their business and protect the people they're trying to help. But at the same time, they should also get involved in the running of the MLS. The problem is if you don't, if you just count on them to do it right, not everybody will necessarily know what the right thing is. And so sometimes they need a little guidance, or at least to know what you're thinking. So at Home Services, we believe that we need to let them know what we want from the MLS for our businesses and for our clients. So we play full on both areas.
How about you, Tim? Why does this matter for those that maybe aren't as engaged or involved? So when we're having these conversations, they look in on it, but shake their heads about it and then kind of move on.
Yeah, it's hard for me to picture a true professional, somebody who takes this business really seriously, is looking in on it and shaking their head at many of the aspects. I think too often we get into these conversations and we focus on the hundreds of symptoms that a massive organization like the real estate industry, I'll expand it beyond an organization. If we have a disease, it's that we've allowed this industry to be populated by the unprofessional. And that produces tons of symptoms that we try to treat, right? It produces people who think they pay too much for a piece of MLS software, or people who think that their association does nothing for them, or you name any one of the hundreds of examples that I've heard on stage over the last few years. Those are all symptoms of the real problem. And the real problem is that we don't have enough people who treat this as a profession. And I may get blasted for saying this, but I start thinking of easy solutions. Like, why doesn't every realtor association in the nation have a mandatory part of core services that say they have to employ somebody that enforces the code of ethics on their own members? Because we're a membership driven organization. So that's a symptom of the problem, right? I mean, the fact that we're membership driven drives us to try to keep membership, and most associations in private, they're going to say similar things, right? Everybody wants to raise the bar, so to speak, but I don't think we do enough in that arena. I think we do. There are certainly people that are, falling over themselves trying to fix it. So I don't want to say that there's not. There are people that are passionate about the problem, but from that one thing stems all the other problems we seem to have in this industry.
Mm-hmm. It's at odds with maybe a pure business approach where you want the quality of the practitioner.
Yeah, nobody owns a business and says, you know what, Microsoft Office costs me way too much money. I can't give that to my front desk admin. But
Right.
Here in this industry, at least once a year, somebody will call me and say they don't want to pay for their admin to have access to the MLS because they're just, inputting listings and looking stuff up. And I think, well, that's the difference between somebody who's running a professional business and outfitting their employees with all the tools they need to accomplish their job, and somebody who's really just kind of playing at this. And I don't mean to demean anybody. There are professionals across the spectrum, but I think you guys get what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's to some degree, it's back to John's earlier point about, we ground these vendors down on the MLS side to supply services. and then we complain and then try to build other stuff because we're not getting what we want. It's the same. Some of that same thinking is coming in the brokerage world as well, as far as trying to, you're saving a nickel, it's costing you $1 in terms of business performance.
Absolutely.
So, well, guys, we have run to the end of our session today. Before we wrap up, I wanted to give you just a moment for any parting words of wisdom, any thoughts for the real estate professionals, whether they're brokers or agents or other executives here, something you've learned, something you've lived by, or something you'd like to share to close us out. And either one of you can start. So let's
Go ahead,
wrap it
Tim.
up.
Oh man, I was going to defer to you, so I had time to think. Something I learn and live by that probably drives my executive staff when I bring it up, they probably roll their eyes. But I've become a fan of John Boyd's OODA loop, which is Jack knows what I'm talking about. All right, everybody here has actually heard of it. Yeah,
I'm reading a Boyd book on strategy right now. That's what's on my Kindle. I was reading it last night. It's great.
Were you really?
Yeah, great stuff.
So I love the John Boyd OODA loop, and I won't even say more than that because if anybody wants to know, they can go Google John Boyd and the OODA loop.
Well, and he's
OODA.
OODA. There's a great book on him about his history as a pilot.
The fighter pilot that changed the art of war.
That's it, and that's a fantastic read if you're a history buff like me and also a strategy nerd. Then you get into that. It's very good. So, John, what about you? Any parting words of wisdom or thoughts to share?
There is, we're moving forward. We've made obviously dramatic changes in the way we all do business over the last 6 months, and we're going to see even more. And you're going to see it accelerating into 2021. And I'm going to ask you if you're on this call, you probably care about MLS technology or data or data rights. There's a great give you another thing besides OODA to search, and that is NOW, which is Networked Office Website data feed. Sam DeBoard from RISO has been working on that. CMLS is getting involved. Home Services is behind it, as are all the other major brands, Compass, Realogy, et cetera. So Keller. So anyway, pay attention to NOW because it's going to become the big discussion of 2021, and I think you're going to love it. And I won't say any more about that. I'll tell you the same thing that Tim said, and that is Google it, Sam DeBoard and NOW policy, and you'll find all kinds of great stuff about it and get behind it.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for spending some time with our audience here today and sharing some of your perspective. I think this has been a great conversation. Clint, anything from you before we wrap up?
No, appreciate what both of you and your organizations have done, though, to really move the bar forward in terms of raising the business acumen of MLSs across the country. I think as there are more and more people that demonstrate leadership, others are compelled to follow.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having us. John, good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, good seeing you, Tim.
Y'all have a great weekend, and we'll see everybody here back again next week.